Hello everyone, welcome back to the SUPboarder review of the new Starboard Gen R, the new generation of racing from Starboard, a board designed to sit in between the Starboard Sprint, the out and out all flat water, and the Starboard All-Star, the all-round board designed to do everything from riding bumps to also paddling fast. Remember, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, please give it a subscription. There's loads of videos like this and technique videos which go out every week. Starboard have designed the Gen R to sit in between those two boards, but they're also saying this is the ultimate weapon when it comes to surf racing and lots of all-round paddling as well. What is the Gen R like to paddle? Is it a board that you should be looking at over potentially an All-Star or a Sprint? Loads of questions to answer, and to be honest, we are going to do a separate video where we're going to be comparing the All-Star, the Sprint and the new Gen R back to back, head to head, to give you a real idea of how they compare against each other. But in this video, we're going to give you a standard SUPboarder review of this new Gen R from Starboard. Okay, so the specifications for this board, the one that we've been using, this is the 14 foot by 25 inches. It's 9.4 inches in its thickest point, and it brings the volume in at 317 litres. When we weighed this one, it came out at 13.21 kilograms. And this one is the blue carbon, which retails at £2,399. You can also opt for the blue carbon sandwich, which is the lighter, more performance-based board, but you're looking at an extra £1,000 for that board. And Starboard recommend the rider weight is going to take up to about a 100 kilogram rider. The Gen R does come in a range of sizes: 14 by 29, 14 by 27, 14 by 25, the 14 by 23, and the 14 by 21.5. If you're going to be looking towards really performance racing, trying to get as fast as possible, you're probably going to be looking towards the 25, 23, 21.5. And that's why they also make the 27 and the 29 with extra bungee eyelet positions up at the front there, because you could potentially take this board touring as well. So now let's run through some of the new design features that are on this board. The outline shape of this board overall is a fairly narrow or parallel outline. So you've still got a fair amount of width going towards the tail. You've still got very much a classic wave piercing nose. That's going to allow it to punch through the water and obviously not slow it down. Keeping a look at the nose of the board, you'll notice there's a lot less volume in this board compared to the other boards in the Starboard range. It has got a slightly recessed deck, a central drainage hole. It's got multiple handle positions, so you can fix it on the side here or in the center like this one is here. You've got an extra leaching point up the front, and you've got your FCS mount up towards the nose. And you've got your pressure valve, which you should always undo on really, really hot days or if you're flying with your board. Turning the board over and looking at the bottom shape of the board, you'll see up at the front there is a small bit of roundness to the board across its width, but it soon knocks back behind the starboard man and it starts to flatten off pretty quick. Still some rounded rails here, but as soon as we get back to near where the center of the board is, we're dealing with a pretty flat board, which is very different from the other race boards that are in the range now. And it moves towards the back of the board, then we have a very slight V coming into the middle of the board, and just before the fin, that V continues, but only very slightly. In the center of the board here, you can see the carbon scupper, which is on the bottom of the drain hole. It's a really nice little sexy feature, that. Solid carbon, hard, so it doesn't close on itself the faster you go. At the back of the board, you've finished off with a single US box fin, and this is a 10-inch fin box. And in that fin box, you can either get a flash fin or a flash plus fin, depending on what size of board you're looking at. And that is a super lightweight fin as well. The rocker line of this board is fairly important. You'll notice that from your standing area towards the front of the board is relatively flat, but towards the back of the board, there is actually tail kick or tail rocker. Now that's going to help a lot more in the open water and surf conditions. We'll speak about that in a minute, but that's something that's different from the other boards that Starboard have got in their range. Okay, so that's all the Starboard stuff, the stuff you find on the website, and to be honest, if you're probably looking into buying this board, you probably already know all of that already. So let's move on to our thoughts of the new Gen R and what it was like to really use. So when you first jump on the Gen R, for its width, you're going to notice it has got a good amount of primary stability. What is primary stability, you might ask? If you haven't seen some of our other videos where we explain it in more detail, to go into it quickly, primary stability is the initial stability you feel when you feel wobble on your board. A secondary stability is when you rock over from side, and the side of the board actually gives you a second bit of stability before you fall over. Some boards have got more primary stability and less secondary stability. Some have got more secondary stability and less primary stability. So the more you wobble, initially that's primary, and as you wobble further but you don't fall in and you recover, that's secondary stability. So this board has a very comfortable feel on the water and a good amount of primary stability because it's a fairly flat bottom and the rails have a slight round to them, but there's a good amount of width going out through the whole of the board and especially towards the back of the tail. It has an average amount of secondary stability because you still have a square rail here, but it's definitely not as big and boxy as other rails. And for most people who are getting into racing or paddling narrow boards, they will generally rather have more primary stability than secondary stability. The reason for that is then they can focus and worry about really being effective with their paddle stroke more, opposed to actually keeping the board stable and staying upright. Because of that stability, you're going to find that going into step back turns, moving around the board is actually going to be really easy to do. And another reason it's easy to do is because it's got a nice flat deck. So you haven't got to climb up any hills really to get towards the back of the board. You've got a flat deck all the way, and then when you are standing at the tail of the board, because it's nice and wide, a nice square end to the board, it does give you a good amount of stability for the width. So for doing boy turns, step back turns, kick turns, whatever you want to call them, it is a very easy and comfortable board to do that. Other stuff you're going to notice on flat water, definitely tracking. This board does track fairly well. I mean, it is a 14-foot board and it is using that full board waterline in the length, so from nose to tail. And because you've got a 10-inch fin box, you've got the ability to move your fin forward and back to give you a more of a maneuverable board, or a board that gives you even better tracking by putting the fin further back. The glide and the overall speed to the Gen R is very good, especially on flat water, because you've got that full waterline length in the water. Couple that, it being fairly parallel in its outline, it is a quick board to paddle. To give you a little bit of a teaser on what we're going to speak about in the next video, where we're comparing the Gen R compared to the All-Star and the Sprint, the Gen R does sit in the middle between the two. The All-Star is the faster board at picking up its pace and paddling quickly, and the Sprint is the quickest board when it comes to long distance flat water paddling. The Gen R is a comfortable sit in between the two, but we're going to speak about that sort of stuff in way more detail in the next video. So that's some general feedback about what the board is like to paddle. What is it like when you're moving it into more challenging conditions? What is it like when you want to go surfing? What is it like when you're punching into chop? What is it like when you're riding downwind? When it comes to paddling into chop, paddling into wind, or paddling in windier conditions in general, the Gen R is much, much happier because it hasn't got as much volume up at the front compared to some of the other boards. Therefore, it's very easy to point to the direction you want to go, whether it's into wind or slightly off the wind, and the board will happily keep going in that direction. Because it's flat under your feet, but with a slight round right up under the nose, it's very easy to control in those conditions. There is a little bit of slapping as you're going out through and over waves, but it isn't something that sort of throws you off or you feel like the board is slowing down. You've still got that wave piercing nose, so it's very easy to penetrate into chop, and it definitely feels very comfortable to use in moderate chop. Because the deck is a little bit recessed but nicely flat, it's still very easy and quick for you to move your feet around to readjust to get the most out of the board when you're pushing into wind. When you've turned around and you're starting to go downwind, that's again where the Gen R is very quick and fun to use. It has that quick pickup speed because it's relatively flat up the front, so you're going to get on that bump or catch that wave very, very easily. But as the board picks up speed, or the waves maybe get bigger, or the bumps get faster, it's very easy to move your feet down and up the board to trim the board to get the most out of it, because again it's nice and flat. But this is definitely a big difference between this and the All-Star. We're going to speak about this in the next video, but you are going to be required to do more footwork with this board when it comes to riding bumps. But when you're on the waves, you have a large amount of maneuverability because of the tail shape and because of this nice big flat deck and the way that the bottom is finished on the board. I can see why Starboard have pushed this into their surf racing category because it is very, very easy to use. If you've got an average to good comprehension about how to trim your board to get the most out of it when riding bumps, the Gen R really does work very, very well. Still lots of speed to get on that bump early, but enough rocker to really get the most out of even the steepest bumps or waves. Another reason why it works so well for this surf racing or technical racing, again, the stability at the tail here when you're moving to your buoy turns, your kick turns. In a more technical race environment, this board is very, very easy and very comfortable. You don't really want to worry too much about getting your footwork perfect to nail your step back turn. You just want to stand at the back of the board, whip the board around and paddle back out. In general, you don't seem to get that much water on the actual board itself, but if you do get any water in the standing area, it does come out very quickly with the central drain hole. They've even recessed just around the handle here a concave in the middle of the board to help drain that water even more. So it's not just a hole on a flat board, they've actually shaped the middle of the board as well. When you first initially look at this board, you don't notice stuff like that, but when you start really looking at the design shape, you can see that really puts certain things into the board to really help the board as much as possible in so many different ways. Another example is the deck pad material itself. This deck pad that you're standing on most of the time is the same deck pad that they've got on the All-Star and the Sprint. It's got like little tiny lines going across your feet, does give it a large amount of grip underneath. They've also put in these white EVA crocodile style grip sections here, which is the same grip as this section. Very nicely put into the board, looks very, very smart. And this is really to help you understand where you're standing on your board or where you potentially need to be standing in certain situations. So most of the paddling time you're going to be standing in the middle over this line. If you're trying to sprint and maybe get a bit more speed out of the board, you're going to be standing towards the front. If you're going to be doing more downwinding or surfing, you're going to be moving towards the back, or you might even be setting your feet offset to do a different type of stance altogether. It's just a quick reference point. You haven't really got to worry about where you're trimming on your board. You can see where you're trimming on your board. Now, there is definitely one other thing that this board is designed for, and I'll put our hands up and say we're no good at it, and that is beach starting. Having a board with a less dugout, more of a flatter board is going to be a lot easier to jumping on your board quickly when it comes to beach starting. Starboard have got some great fast beach start team riders. We are definitely not any of them, so I'll let them do the beach starts. And to be honest, most of you I know aren't really looking at doing that, but this board is geared up towards beach starting. Having a slight recessed deck gives you the extra stability, but not too recessed that it's going to become a pain when it comes to jumping on your board. But we can bring this into a real world sense as climbing back on and off your board from the water. Having a flatter board is a lot easier than having a big dugout. A lot of you really struggle climbing on your boards if they're big and dug out. You have to go towards the back of the board and sort of shimmy yourself up. With this, it's much easier to climb on and off your board. So in a real world sense, that's something to bear in mind as well. So now let's move into the conditions that will best suit this board and who we think potentially should be buying this board. Conditions wise, it is happy on flat water and it's equally happy in rough stuff, and it's very happy in surf. There's always compromises in every single one of those elements, and that's why Starboard have brought out 3 boards in their race range. But to get the most out of that board, especially in the rougher conditions, I would say you need to be a slightly better paddler. You could easily paddle this board on flat water as a beginner because it has a good amount of stability, and it is easy to do your step back turns, it's easy to climb on, and it gives you a very good top speed. But when it comes to the rougher conditions, because it hasn't got as much volume up at the nose compared to the All-Star, you're finding you are going to have to move around this board a little bit more. So it is going to require you to be a little bit more on it with your footwork. So definitely more of the improver intermediate to advanced paddlers. I agree with Starboard and think this could take up to a 100 kilo rider for sure. If you really know how to trim your board and you've been on a lot of race boards in the past, you could be looking at this board 95, 100 kilos for sure. Real sweet spot for you intermediate riders, definitely 90 to 65 kilos. If you're lighter than that, lighter than 65 kilos, to be honest, you could probably get away with the narrower base board because it is a fairly stable board. But remember, in choppier conditions, you're going to have to learn to move about the board to get the most out of it. Any cons or observations? Well, there's no massive cons to this board. It does exactly what Starboard have designed it to do, and it does fit in between both the All-Star and the Sprint, and it is needed in the range. Maybe the 25 could still have extra potential tie-down bungees like the 27 and the 29 does, because I know for me personally, I still love to take this board touring. If you're carrying it long distances like I had to do when I walked down a cliff, it's not the most comfortable to carry because you can either carry it in the central carry handle, but then these sort of raised edges end up getting on your wrists, or you can carry it on your shoulder, or you can carry it on the side. But to be fair, it's not a board designed to be carried long distances. The other one is definitely a personal thing. I'd actually love to see this board in a completely different colour compared to the All-Star and the Sprint. I do find the boards all do look very similar, but again, that's a completely personal observation. In summary, Starboard have delivered with this Gen R board. It does sit perfectly in between the All-Star and the Sprint. Many top racers may have both boards, but there's a lot of people out there who just want one race board, and this board could be it. From flat water to choppy conditions, the Gen R is very versatile and very happy in both. Super stable, easy to turn, and a lot of you are going to get into racing because of this board, or maybe just paddling faster because of this board. Keep an eye out for the comparison video where we're going to be comparing the All-Star, the Gen R and the Sprint all around the same width to give you the full comparison of what each of those boards is like, and obviously giving you an idea of potentially which boards out of those you should be looking at. I hope you found this video interesting and informative. If you've used the Gen R, if you've got the Gen R, please let us know. Always love to hear your feedback. Until next time, remember to check out SUPboarder Pro for more videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you on another video soon.